Welcome back to the class on international business communication. We have been talking about different things, different aspects of communication. We have talked about verbal, non-verbal, written. We are now discussing, we've discussed persuasive communication. We will discuss written communication later. We are now discussing, we were discussing persuasive communication in the last class. Today we will talk about an application of persuasive communication, or a form of communication that uses influence as its main operational input. So, today we will talk about leadership. Who's a leader? Some fun stuff first. Have you heard of Scott Adams? Scott Adams is the creator of Dilbert Comics. And he says that a leader is someone who gets people to do things that benefit him or her, and it's a joke, so it's got a smiley face, but that is one common perception of what a leader is and what leaders do. Okay. What is leadership? Now we come to more serious stuff. These are the definitions that have been proposed by people who have actively been engaged in research in leadership communication and organizational behavior and organizational design and all of those things. So, they say that the leadership is the art of inducing subordinates to accomplish their assignments with zeal and confidence. It is an art, it is something that can be developed, that an art of inducing people who work for you, people who are lower in the hierarchy than you, to accomplish whatever they are supposed to do with zeal and confidence. It is a process by which people are directed, guided and influenced in choosing and achieving goals. So, it is a process where you help people decide and achieve their goals. It is organizationally useful behavior by one member of an organizational family toward another member or members of that same organizational family. So, these are all varied definitions. In real life, we understand that leaders are people who really take a group of people from point A to point B. Why leadership? Why do we need leaders? The first thing, again, this is in a book on organizational communication by Lewis, published in 1980. According to Lewis, leadership, the reason why leadership becomes necessary is incompleteness of organizational design. If there is something missing, you need somebody to identify those gaps and fill up those gaps, and that is where the leader comes in. Leader is the person who identifies those gaps and fills in those gaps. The second reason is changing environmental conditions, and I will link it up to something you've studied earlier on in these lectures. There is some change, you need somebody to help the organization adapt to these changes, so the leader comes in. Internal dynamics of organizations, that is another reason. You need somebody to stabilize the internal dynamics of the organization, to maintain the relationships in the organization, to keep the organization going. Nature of human membership in organizations. Human beings by nature can be very, very biased, can be oriented towards groups, can be they don't necessarily, we don't necessarily always, we are not always able to align ourselves with interests of others. Human beings by nature are hedonistic creatures, and in order to remind human beings in the organization to collaborate with each other, to cooperate with each other, to work for the betterment of somebody other than themselves, we need leaders. So, these are some of the reasons why leaders are essential. Okay. Leadership, essentially, the person in the group whose primary, a leader is the person in the group whose primary responsibility is to ensure the group's focus, efficiency and stability. That is a leader. Okay. Leadership vision, what should a leader be looking forward to according to Adams? Again, the leader knows the future and has agreed to share it with the company instead of using this awesome power to make a fortune gambling. Again, a joke, but still it is somebody who has a vision. The chosen direction is somehow not obvious as you think, so you are lucky to have the leader at any price. There are intangible benefits to being an employee. These intangible benefits compensate for the low pay and poor working conditions, and these intangible benefits will be revealed to you by somebody called the leader. Again, this is a sarcastic spin on it, and I thought, why not? People have different perceptions about what leaders are, who leaders are, what they do, etc. So, according to Scott Adams, any good leader operates under the assumption that the people being led are astonishingly gullible and they don't know what is going on. And that is what many leaders a lot of times are perceived to believe. Now, we don't know if it is really so, but we tend to believe this about leaders we don't like or we don't get along with. Okay. Some skills that leaders need to have. The ability to take credit for things that happen on their own, again a sarcastic spin. Many times people think that their leaders take credit for things that they do, or take the credit and pass it on to somebody else. Leaders are people who can pursue a path that is seemingly nonsensical or even dangerous to anyone. Now, even though this is a sarcastic spin on the survival skills of leaders, this is inherently very true. This is this is something that leaders do. They traverse the uncharted territory, they go through the uncharted territory, they go to parts, they do things that other people may not have dreamt of doing. Okay, jokes apart. Leadership is the process of influencing others to understand and agree about what needs to be done, how to do it, and the process of facilitating individual and collective efforts to accomplish shared objectives. So, it is a process that involves recognition, understanding, facilitation, accomplishment, and eventually review, which feeds into understanding what more needs to be done. And somebody who can do all these things is considered a leader. What are business leaders expected to do? Back to lesson 1, when we talk about leaders, we in the business environment, we typically call them, especially at the executive level, managers. Business managers are very good example of leaders. They have a team that they are supposed to be responsible, or that they are responsible for. They have a team in which they have to get things done. They are heading the team and they are answerable for their activities or for the activities of the whole team to the main administration. So, at this point we are going to use the word manager and leader interchangeably. Now, what do managers do? Externally, they have financial sources, they communicate with the financial sources, they communicate with customers, suppliers and competition, they communicate with government, press and public. They take all these inputs and they are a part of the general management. In the general management, or the managers have their bosses, they have peers, they have immediate subordinates, they have subordinates of subordinates, and they are being bombarded by all this communication. They have to make sense of this communication, they have to identify the directions of future work or of organizational activity. They have to sort through the chaos of this bombardment of information, and they have to find their direction, they have to identify their resources, they have to work through their limitations, and they have to move on and help the others in their team also move on. Okay. What do managers do? Again, lesson 1, managers motivate, direct, allocate, coordinate, monitor, evaluate, plan, react and develop, from a paper by Squires published in 2001. How do managers do what they do? They engage in these processes, and what affects what managers do, and here is where the leadership comes in. Contingencies are unexpected events that happen that affect what you do, and for managers, contingencies are really what test their effectiveness. Contingencies, their behavior, their performance in any contingent event essentially tests their effectiveness as leaders. So, what are the different kinds of contingencies that managers may face? The first is related to the mission, where it could be nature, unity and stability of the mission could be at stake. The organization, size, structure and culture of the organization could be a contingency. These are things that you can't control. Environment, regulatory, economic and social. And these are some of the contingencies. Nothing that I say is exhaustive. I told you upfront, I am going to keep repeating it. You can add many things to these lists, but this is one form of, one way of categorizing everything that is happening in our environment that's beyond our control. And we have to function effectively within this environment, within these in light of or in the midst of all these things that we are unable to control, that are really affecting what we do. How do we control these things? When we talk about controlling, we come up with the issue of authority and power. Authority is one of the traits that leaders have. Once they are in that position, they are responsible for getting people together. They are responsible for focusing resources, focusing personnel, focusing goals, focusing ideas and taking the group in a particular direction. And in order to do that, there is some amount of authority involved, there is some amount of power that is exerted by the leader on the subordinates, and that is what we will talk about now. Authority is the character of a communication in a formal organization, by virtue of which it is accepted by a contributor to or member of the organization as governing the action he contributes, that is, as governing or determining what he does or is not to do so far as the organization is concerned. So, it is really the character of a communication, the manner in which we tell somebody, we direct, we regulate somebody's behavior, and that is where the authority comes in. How we regulate the behavior, how people perceive what we have said, for them to interpret it as meaning something or direction for something they should or should not do. Some types of authority. First is the authority of position. The second is the authority of leadership. Authority of position is the authority ascribed to a communication based on the fact that it originates from a superior position in the organizational structure, regardless of the ability of the person occupying the position. Now, what this means is that by virtue of a position, you are supposed to obey somebody. I am sitting in this position, I say I am an expert on communication and you are supposed to obey me. Or I am your teacher, forget the communication part. I am your teacher, I do not care what you are studying, I am a faculty member here. Some student within the IIT campus comes up and I say you need to do this, and the person says why, and I say because I am a faculty member and you are a student. Just by virtue of the position I am holding, the person perceives that I have some authority over something that is happening. For example, I can tell the students to not speed too much, and I say please mind your speed, please follow the rules while riding your bicycles on campus. On our campus we don't allow students to keep motorized vehicles, which is nice, but even then some students tend to speed up on their bicycles when they see an empty road, very natural. And if I go up to a student and I say you are not supposed to do this, and the person says why not, and I say I am a teacher and I am telling you not to do it. You could do the same thing in your office. You could say in virtue or by virtue of my position as a manager, I can tell a frontline worker to do or not do something, and the person is somehow perceives that I have that authority because I am in a different hierarchical position. Authority of leadership, authority ascribed to a communication based on the knowledge and ability of the person communicating the message, regardless of the position she occupies. So, this is what authority by way of expertise. You are an expert, you have an ability, you know something. Now, authority of leadership would be I am a leader. I would say I know communication better than the people listening to it. I hope I am right, maybe I am not. But just because I know communication better than the people who are listening to it, they need to listen to what I am saying. I feel that I know more about something. You could be a legal expert and you would say because I have a degree in law, and whether you have been appointed as the legal advisor of an organization or not, but if you have a law degree and you give somebody legal advice, they would take that advice because of your training in that area, or you're an engineer or you're a doctor and giving appropriate advice. So, that is what we mean here. Power in groups. Now, power is the control that the authority gives to one or more of its members for regulation and control. The difference between power and authority is that authority is perceived. Power is something that people have. You have the power. Authority is what people perceive you have. Okay. Power is something that you really have. Power is the control that the group gives to one or more of its members for regulation and control. Some types of power: you have legitimate power, which is the position power, which is the result of official role of the leader. In my position as so and so, I can do it. I have been authorized. That means people have perceived me to have to be able to do something. Excuse me. But I have a legitimate power by virtue of the position that I am holding. Coercive power is power by instilling fear of negative consequences in the event of non-compliance. So, do this or else, something negative to follow. Reward power is the exact opposite of coercive power. You say you do this because if you do this, I will give you this positive thing. You know, you will get a reward, you will get money, you will get praise, you will be elevated in the eyes of your peers, etc., etc. Expert power is genuine expertise, and referent power is genuine respect for a person who is perceived to be competent and trustworthy. Various forms in which you have the power and can exert the power on your group members. We had talked, when we talked about relational communication, we had discussed how people in groups exert pressure on each other. We had discussed power also, and this is, some of it is division, some of it is application. Now, all of these things have an impact on how leaders are perceived to be, how leaders are formed. Sometimes leaders are nominated, sometimes leaders are they just emerge out of the group because of the group dynamics themselves. Leadership style. Some styles of leadership: exploitative, authoritarian, or autocratic. As the name suggests, this is a style in which the authority is exploited. People take advantage, people end up harming others when they don't listen to them. So, this is a style that uses coercive power as its main weapon. Do this or else. I have the power to hurt you and I will hurt you. This is what I want done. If you don't do this, I am going to hurt you in ways that you can't even imagine. So, that is the autocratic style of leadership. You will come across such people. We had discussed this when we some bit of this when we were talking about communication climates and communication styles also. Benevolent authoritarian: you treat followers like children, you micromanage, but not to the detriment of the followers. So, authoritarian or authoritarian autocratic style is when you do things to the detriment of people. Benevolent authoritarian is when you don't exploit people, but you still keep micromanaging, you keep telling them what they should be doing and what they should not be doing. Consultative democratic is ask for and receive participative input from group, but maintain the right to make the final decision. So, this is the kind of leadership style where you encourage people's inputs and you take their decisions, you take their suggestions, you pool in their suggestions, and then you finally make your decision based on the suggestions you may have received. Participative democratic is you give some direction to the group, but there is total participation and decision by majority or consensus. So, this is if you can see this slide, you will see that we are moving from a very tightly controlled style to slightly more open. So, exploitative authoritarian is like this, I will tell you how to breathe. And then benevolent authoritarian, you are a child, you don't know how to do this, you don't know how to do that, and I will help you do different things. Consultative democratic is, I will show you different paths, but you decide what to do and I will take the decision for the group at the end. Participative democratic is when you get the inputs from different people and you somehow you let the group decide on its own. You don't have the final, you don't use your authority as the leader to decide what the group needs to do. So, there is total participation, the decision is by majority or consensus. Laissez-faire is you exert little or no influence on the group, members rely on each other for direction. It is like nominating a leader, but not necessarily having the leader there. You know, there is somebody who is called as the head of the group, but the person does not really do anything. What is the psychological impact of leaders' communication style on subordinate? This is where this starts getting a little difficult. Now, I am trying to help you understand the implications of whatever we have been talking about. Different styles of leadership affect the employees or the people being subjected to that leadership very differently. So, patronizing and condescending interaction results in the undercutting of formal authority. There was a research that was conducted in which a superior who was a male was patronizing and condescending towards a female subordinate, and that undercut her authority in front of her subordinates and her peers as well. And that makes you feel very uncomfortable. Interactive and personal rather than competitive and distant, accomplished through interactive communication, challenging others to produce results, communicating openness, participative decision making and effective boundary spanning. You do this and people are more involved, they feel more comfortable in the interaction, they feel more satisfied with the interaction. Abuse of power is another thing that may happen in the leader's communicative style. People may abuse their power, they may abuse their power to be sexually improper, they could engage in verbal and non-verbal hostility. Abused employees are more likely to leave their jobs and report lower job and life satisfaction, lower commitment, great work family conflict and psychological distress. We had talked about this when we talked about autocratic climates, people will not let you speak. They will completely disregard what you are saying and completely sideline you, and that can be very detrimental to the efficiency of the employee, and people report lower job satisfaction, and all this happens in and through communication. You will say, why are we discussing all this boring detail in a class on communication? How will you know that somebody is being rude to you? How will you know that somebody is being controlling? How will you know that somebody is really exerting all this pressure? One piece of paper that says do this or else will not be sufficient, not in this day and age. Unless there is repeated interaction of that nature, you really don't, it doesn't sink in, because we as human beings believe that others are usually good unless they prove it otherwise. Communication as a determinant of leadership. There are various theories that discuss leadership, that discuss what leadership is, how leadership comes up, what are the different styles of leadership. All that is beyond the scope of this class. The one theory that fits in here very, very well is the leader member exchange theory, the LMX theory, and that is the one theory that I am going to discuss. Otherwise, we have other theories, behavior and trait theories, we have moral theories, we have all kinds of different theories that deal with what leadership is and how people become leaders and how they function as leaders, but it's more behavioral than communication oriented. So, I decided to choose this theory for discussion in this class. What happens is, according to this theory, leaders form relationships of varying quality across subgroups of subordinates rather than relating to them uniformly. So, what really happens is that people form these relationships. They form relationships with their subordinates, and they don't they have differential relationships with different subordinates. Their relationships are not uniform, and that affects how they talk to their subordinates. They have in groups, they have mid groups, they have out groups, and the levels of mutual support and influence are usually according to the group the relationships fall into. So, as obvious, people in the in group would have the maximum amount of support, would have probably the maximum amount of interaction, would be the most pampered lot by the leader, and many leaders engage in this to control the organization. Power and social distance, some determinants. In the in group, language is used to neutralize the power distance. And how does this happen? Both parties may interrupt each other, subordinate actively trying to influence and also deferring to his supervisor's authority, and supervisor offering support for employees' choices. And this is based on a research that was conducted by Fairhurst and Chandler, that was published in 1989. And this is what they discovered, that in the in group, people were they negotiated communication rules with the superior. In the mid group, the power and social distance were ambiguously displayed. You take your pick. We will not enforce the power distance, but the power distance has increased from the in group. Okay. The employee readily disagreed with her supervisor, but his response was to change the subject, and then she realized that this was not the right time, so she followed his lead. Out group is language. The power distance is displayed through the language that the superior uses. It involved a brief conflict episode in which the supervisor made direct suggestions and the employee complied, and the employee said no point in fighting because there is no way out of this situation. So, the power distance is maximized. We had discussed power distance in our class on intercultural communication, and that is pretty much what we are talking about here. Communication patterns and LMX quality. I'm sorry, I'm unable to pronounce the last name of the researcher. Yerl, I'm not sure. Hartman and Gall, in this paper by Krohn, Kramer and Sias, published in 2010, mentions two types of communication patterns that influence LMX quality. The first one is coordination, uni versus bidirectional coordination. So, what happens is, and participation is what is encouraged by superiors in decision making. Now, what I did was I took their explanation and put it into a table for you to understand. If we look at the table, high LMX quality has a person-centered communication style, messages that encourage employee autonomy and reflection on the complexities of a given situation, indicates high LMX quality. Contrary to this, position-centered communication style, messages that discourage reflection and emphasize status differences between supervisor and employee. I am the boss, you are the subordinate. X is a senior professor, Y is an associate professor, you are an assistant professor. Or if you go to the IPS, the Director General of Police is talking to the Superintendent of Police, and very strictly hierarchical. Or Lieutenant General in the Army is talking to a Major in the Army. So, huge power distance. So, it is not about Mr. X talking to Ms. Y, it is about person in that position talking to person in this position. In group, people have a high, and this has been proven by research, the in group people have a high LMX quality than the out group people, because there is higher frequency of communication in the case of an in group, there is low frequency of communication in the out group, and that also has a bearing irrespective of which group you belong to. Higher frequency of computer mediated communication has a positive relationship between, there is a positive relationship between the frequency with which the subordinates communicate with their supervisors via email and their perceptions of LMX. Now, let us realize that all this is based on research that was probably published 10 years ago and conducted maybe a couple of years before that. So, the actuals are dated by more than a decade. At that point of time, maybe email was not as popular. Today, email is the form of communication. So, at that point, it was found that superiors encourage email communication with people they are that are part of their in-group, and that led to more satisfaction. But these days it is the name of the game, and by the time these lectures are broadcast and archived, we will probably be out of paper-based messaging anyway. Relational maintenance tactics. In the in-groups, personal and direct communication takes place to maintain their leader-member relationship. Leaders use a personal and direct communication style. In the out-group, you have regulative tactics. For example, the superior will talk superficially. They will avoid discussion of problems, your problems and their concerns with you. Types of relationships the supervisor develops with his or her various employees affects the relationships among those employees as well. You have the boss's blue-eyed boys and girls, and you have the boss's victims, and they tend to be isolated from the group. The blue-eyed ones are isolated because they are the boss's pets, and people perceive that they have undue advantage. They get favors that are not necessarily deserved by them just because the boss likes them. So they may be isolated. Again, the research that I've referred to here actually talked about that, but in real life, and this is just an observation, it could be proven wrong. In real life, the boss's pets may be actually sought after, at least in just for the appearance sake. People hang out with the boss's pet in the hope that they will also be noticed by the boss and they will also get these favors. The boss's victims may be drawn into the social network or sidelined in the case of an autocratic boss. The research indicates that they will be drawn into the social network because people feel that this boss's blue-eyed boy or girl is getting an advantage over the others. So they say, okay, here's a group of people who are not getting that advantage. Since you are being victimized, you're also welcome into our group. You are a worse example than us. In the case of an autocratic boss, people are so scared of the boss that they isolate the boss's victim as well. And they, for fear of harshness from the boss, for including the victim, they say, the boss doesn't like you, we don't want to hang out with you because the boss will think badly about us. And even though they may like this person on a personal level, they don't want to be seen with this person, they don't want to be interacting with this person for fear of harshness from the boss. Excuse me. LMX and international business communication. The application of LMX in international business communication. Organizational members in out-group relations are more likely to engage in defensive communication with their supervisor, more likely to experience burnout than their in-group counterparts. Obviously, if somebody is pushing you away constantly, somebody is not giving you clear direction, somebody you look up to for direction or you depend on for direction and decisions is not including you in decisions, is completely sidelining you, it will result in burnout, it will result in dissatisfaction, it will result in conflict. Workers who enjoy in-group relationships with their supervisors are more likely to gain the attention of supervisors and to receive favorable treatment. Again, this is a corollary to what we just talked about. Now, if you think about it, and this is something I have not put on the slides, just think about it. You may perceive that you are part of the in-group of the boss, but the boss thinks that you are part of the out-group and the boundaries are not clear. What do you do then? Think about it, discuss, maybe you will come up with an answer. These differences in perceptions, usually if it is an extreme case, it is very clear. The boss thinks you are part of the in-group, you know that you are part of the in-group, you are invited to every meeting, every discussion, you sit and chat with the boss, there is ha ha he going on, that is one thing. The other extreme is that the boss looks at you and looks through you every time you wish the boss and you say, what have I done wrong? And so that is, in those situations it becomes clear, but then many times things are very murky. In human behavior, things are usually murky. What will happen if the way you perceive your relationship with the boss is not similar to the way the boss perceives his or her relationship with you? And I am not talking about romantic relationships, I am talking about very professional relationships, I am talking about the schema the schemata you have about your relationship with the boss, where you stand in relation to the boss, and how these rules may interplay. And you have to think about those things when you're interacting with people whose behavior is ambiguous for some reason. Okay. Subordinates who reported that they had high quality relationship with their supervisors used more articulated dissent. Open dissent expressed to the supervisor in the hope of improving the situation. And this is what I was talking about. You may think that you have an open communication with the boss. You go to the boss and say, you've not been nice to me, what is the problem? And the boss is looking at his screen, you're sitting in front, the boss is not looking at you and says, no problem, I have no problem with you. And you say, please give me some feedback, and the boss says, I have no feedback for you, you're doing your job well. And the boss just comes up with something you already know. Boss says, and you say, can you please give me some appointment, you seem busy, but can you give me an appointment for some time? And the boss says, no, we can talk now, I don't have time, I keep getting all these emails, I don't have time for anyone, people just come barging into my office, you don't know what I face. And you're left confused, and the boss in meetings says that I'm encouraging open communication, but then when you go and try to talk to the boss about your difficulties, the boss is looking at the screen and not even acknowledging your questions. And that can lead to conflict, that can lead to felt conflict, that can eventually turn into perceived conflict, and that can manifest itself in the situation, and it can really make things bad. So these are the implications. This is how this ties in. Subordinates with low quality relationships with their supervisors used more latent dissent, complaining to co-workers with express dissatisfaction. Now in relationships, subordinates who perceive that the quality of their relationship with the boss is not good tend to gossip. They tend to discuss their problems with others, people other than the boss himself or herself. In-group members may also benefit through idiosyncratic deals, which are special negotiations between a worker and a supervisor to meet the worker's individual needs. These are special favors that people get from their bosses, and people may engage in this, especially in-group members. And again, all this has been proven by research. You can look up these papers yourselves. Supervisors also attempt to benefit from strong supervisor-subordinate relationships insofar as they increase workers' attachment to the organization and its mission, improve workers' task performance, and lower turnover. Now, we've discussed the negative impacts of being a part of the in-group of supervisors. The positive aspect of this is that it enhances people's commitment, it increases how connected people feel to the organization, and if they have a good relationship with the boss, they don't want to leave at that point. So they say, I have a great boss, why should I leave? I'm the boss's pet, why should I leave? Supervisor-worker non-verbal immediacy positively influences relationships, leading to many desired outcomes such as job satisfaction, motivated followers, trusting relationships between workers and supervisors, and supervisor credibility. Now, when we talk about non-verbal immediacy, we are not talking about shaking hands, we are not talking about hugging, we are not talking about all those things. We are essentially talking about how they acknowledge each other, how they support each other without saying anything, and that is the non-verbal immediacy. You know, they see each other, they make sure they notice each other's absence when the other person is not there, and all this has a bearing on the relationship between the boss and the subordinate, and it can again positively influence job satisfaction and other factors related to performance at work. Workers who trust their supervisor are less likely to engage in deception and obstructionism, harbor hostility, and behave aggressively. Again, people who trust their bosses, people who have a level of faith in their boss, don't engage in or are less likely to deceive people. I mean, why would you know, we are all hedonistic creatures. Why would we do something negative when we don't need to do it? People engage in deception when they have something better to look forward to. but you're getting your salary, you have a nice boss, you're getting all the opportunities that you can possibly get when in that position. So people don't really engage in deception, in obstructionism, in preventing others from moving forward. They don't harbor hostility and they don't behave aggressively. Supervisors are the strongest organizational influence capable of reducing worker burnout. This is something that we need to acknowledge and accept, that supervisors determine the behavior of supervisors, verbal and non-verbal, essentially determines how people react, how people feel about their jobs, and this is one of the most potent determining factors in international business, especially in business and especially in international business, because you are anyway, the level of familiarity with your peers, with maybe with the job, maybe with the location, is not so high. So you are depending exclusively on this one person that you were forced to establish contact with. The first part of the lecture on relational communication. So you have to have a relationship with the boss, and the better it is, the more comfortable you feel in your surroundings. You say, okay, this is one place where our comfort zones are aligned, and that of course reduces worker burnout. Humor is another factor that influences superior subordinate relationships, and I'm discussing supervisor subordinates in leaders, because supervisors excuse me, formalized supervisors are actually, it is a form of formalized leadership. People report to you, you are responsible for helping them focus. So leadership is an essential quality of a supervisory role. It is an inherent part of the supervisory role. Managers and subordinates consciously use humor as a part of their communication style. Everybody wants to feel happy, everybody wants to feel nice. It could be formal, it could be informal, it could be positive, it could be negative. Subordinates use more positive humor because negative humor may be misinterpreted, may be misconstrued. Superiors, usually men, are more likely than women to use expressive humor and negative humor, humor used to criticize. Sarcasm is an example of negative humor. Supervisors use humor to enhance relational satisfaction. B/W stands for between. Space was limited. I wanted to put in a lot of stuff between themselves and their subordinates, which also enhances the organizational climate. Both are likely to result in employees' willingness to engage in extra citizenship behaviors. An apostrophe is missing next to employees, so I'm sorry about that. But supervisors use humor to enhance relationships. They feel that it is one way of aligning people's comfort zones. And the more comfortable you feel with the use of humor in your workplace, the better chances of you developing an extra organizational relationship are. Managers who use humor in interacting with workers foster employees' satisfaction with the supervisors, and those supervisors are also more likely to be judged as responsive to workers' needs. Now, people who engage in this humor are perceived to be responsive, to be sensitive, and they are perceived to be more comfortable or better leaders or more humane leaders than people who are not using humor as much. Culture and leadership. Now we are coming to the portion where we were talking about international business. Now we will talk about how culture influences leadership, culture in the international business arena. Culture is another aspect of our environment, a very important aspect of our environment, that impacts everything we do. And how does culture influence leadership and vice versa? The first one is leadership styles and power distance. High power distance index (PDI) countries are those in which decisions were usually made in an autocratic, persuasive or paternalistic style rather than in a consultative or democratic style. So, we were talking about power distance, we talked about individualism, we talked about collectivism, we talked about uncertainty, we talked about all of these things when we discussed intercultural communication, and I am going to refer to those things just to give you an idea of why leadership is important, how leadership changes with changes in culture. So, in cultures where there is high power distance, there is an inequality between group members, there is a hierarchical order, and there is directive behavior. Somebody up here is telling the person down below to do something. Cultures with a low PDI value, I'm sorry about the spelling mistake, value equality, independence, and the use of power for legitimate purposes. Now, please discuss amongst yourselves how this PDI or how the power distance, the perception of power distance in different cultures would influence the communication rules that are followed in official interactions in between members of different cultures. Leadership styles and uncertainty reduction. Cultures with a high uncertainty avoidance index. What is uncertainty avoidance index? It is a measure of a culture's willingness or a culture's keenness to avoid uncertainty, to avoid risk. And cultures with a high uncertainty avoidance index rely on the enforcement of rules, hierarchical structure, and the competence of those with authority to reduce uncertainty. This is more authoritarian. We say we don't want to take risk, we want to avoid uncertainty at all costs. In order to do this, we will organize our group into a hierarchical structure, and we will delegate people to deal with this uncertainty, and those people, so we will give them the authority to deal with this uncertainty, and there will be rules to be followed, and if we follow these rules and we organize ourselves into the structure, the level of uncertainty will go down. Low UAI cultures are characterized by a greater tolerance for uncertainty and less dependence on rules, established order, or authority. So, people people who are always prepared will not really want to follow rules as much. The leadership style there would probably be democratic. In a place where people are more keen on avoiding uncertainty, they will look forward or they will look up to the leader for direction. And when you look up to somebody for direction and the person knows that you're looking up to them, the style becomes, it changes. It could be benevolent, it could be exploitative, but there is somebody telling you what to do, as opposed to a culture in which you are not really looking up to anyone for direction because you feel you can handle different situations yourselves, and so it's more democratic and you sort of pull in your suggestions about how you dealt with different situations. As a leadership styles and individualism as a culture's PDI, culture's dependency on powerful individuals such as group leaders increases, its individualism index, including the culture's dependency on the group, decreases. So, the individualism is inversely proportional to the power distance. As the power distance increases, the individualism decreases. As individualism increases, the power distance comes down. People from high individualistic cultures or cultures with high individualism index can be presumed to be more satisfied under a leader who promotes self-initiative and exercises influence only when legitimate. Now, in the book, it was given that they will be, and I somehow refrain from using the word will. We don't know how people in these situations will be. So, I say they may be presumed to be more satisfied under a leader who promotes self-initiative and exercises influence only when legitimate. People from low individualistic cultures may be presumed to be more satisfied under an autocratic leader. I don't know how many people in any culture would really like people shooting orders at them. They may look up to somebody, they may look at somebody for direction, but again, those people may be presumed to be satisfied under an authoritarian leader. Autocratic leader, I don't think anyone would be satisfied, who promotes traditional points of view. Again, this is based on Hofstede's research. mentioned in this paper by Lustig and Casota. Again, I hope I am pronouncing the name right. Leadership styles and masculinity. Masculinity is commonly associated with objectivity, assertiveness, discipline, and control. Low masculinity, high femininity is typically associated with subjectivity, emphasis on interpersonal relations and openness. So, group members in cultures where the masculinity index is high, they may be presumed to be more satisfied under an autocratic leader. People in cultures where the MAS or masculinity index is low may be presumed to be more effective under a democratic leader. Now, this has implications for the international business arena. Which culture are you coming from? What is your leader's background? Conformity introduces order and coordination of individual behaviors and expectations from group members. Based on informational social influence, the result of the value that conformity may have, it is based on the informational social influence, and it is a result of the value that conformity may have for the individual. So, it could also be based on normative social influence, which is the result of a desire to conform to the expectations of the group. So, in one case the conformity has a relationship to the value of the activity for the individual. Now, let us tie it in with high context and low context cultures. In individualistic cultures, we really conform based on informational social influence. In high context cultures, we conform because of normative social influence, which is a result of a desire to fit in, conform to the expectations of the group. Individuals susceptible to conformity typically are authoritative, traditional, loyal to the group, compliant to status and rules, and dependent upon social approval as expected. Individuals less likely to conform are non-authoritative, independent, individualistic, and self-reliant. Conformity and high power distance. High power distance is related to hierarchical order. You can expect conformity, you can expect high power distance in cultures that have a high power distance, you have a hierarchical order, you can expect conformity which feeds into the high power distance, and the cycle continues. In cultures where you have a low power distance, the use of power is for legitimate reasons, there is less expectation of conformity, and that feeds into this low or further lowering of power distance. Conformity and uncertainty avoidance. Ambiguous stimuli produce greater conformity than unambiguous stimuli, and high ambiguity in high UAI cultures or cultures that expect higher uncertainty avoidance leads to or is related to high conformity. High tolerance for ambiguity is related to low UAI, which is related to further dependent on or related to low anxiety or indicative of low anxiety, readiness to live day by day, little resistance to change, and low conformity. Again, sort of these cycles continue. Conformity and individualism. High individualism is related to low pressures to conform. Low individualism is related to high allegiance to group or high pressures to conform. Conformity and masculinity. High masculinity is related to low conformity, low masculinity is related to high conformity. We do not have time to talk about discussion processes. Discussion processes are patterns, I am sorry about the spelling mistake. Discussion processes are patterns that group members use in order to accomplish their tasks. We could have, you could go through these slides. Discussion processes and power distance are connected. High PDI is related to decision making where relationships are emphasized. Low PDI is related to decisions where tasks are emphasized. And again, this goes back to our discussions on high and low context cultures, and all of this is happening in and through communication. Power distance is being expressed through communication. What we feel about leaders is being expressed through communication. So all of this is being expressed in and through communication. Now, discussion processes and individualism are again related. Verbosity is encouraged in individualistic cultures, verbosity is discouraged in collectivistic cultures. Collectivistic cultures are more likely to engage in long discussions than individualistic cultures. Again, and they are more likely to come up with decisions that are more in line with what the group wants, as opposed to decisions made in individualistic cultures, which are more dependent on the logic or logical background. Discussion processes and masculinity. Low context cultures tend to encourage task related control and task competence, and that in turn generates appropriate or leadership that is more task related and more dependent on the competence in particular tasks. In high context cultures, gender may predict participation in group rules, and that may determine who comes out as the leader. Now, we don't have time for all this. What I would really like to give you is some philosophical advice, and this advice is from this book about leaders. We were talking about power and authority. This is a book called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. It was published in the year 2000, and I would like to give you some advice from this book about what leaders can do in order to be perceived as leaders, in order to be perceived as people with authority. The first, and this book suggests 48 different issues, but I pulled out 5 of these issues and I thought I would share them with you. The first one here is, you need to act like royalty to be treated like one, act like a leader to be treated like one. If you hold your own, people will start perceiving that you are a leader, and people will start perceiving your authority, and that will feed into itself, and you will eventually come out victorious. And again, you need to develop that sense of royalty. The book says royal, I say leader. You need to develop those qualities in yourself in order to be perceived as a leader. First, develop those qualities, change your intrapersonal context, adapt it to the context on the outside, and communicate accordingly through your verbal messages, through your non-verbal messages, and then let the feedback coming from the environment help you restructure this new notion of this independent entity of a leader. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. We all say we need to be, we are influenced by, we are motivated by, we have these ideals. Yes, it's nice to be impressed by people. It's nice to follow what they do, but please don't try and imitate people, because you will fall flat on your face and your authority could be undermined. Beware of stepping into a great man's shoes. You will have to accomplish twice as much, and the example is out there. People who've done really well have children who have not been able to do so well, and they have really faltered. So don't try and ape people, just be influenced by them and for want of a better word, I'm sorry, I'm fogging up right now, but anyway, so be influenced, be motivated by people, but don't ape them. That's what I want to say. Difficulties in the way of persuasion lie in my knowing the heart of the persuaded in order thereby to fit my wording into it. You should be able to understand the context of the person you're trying to persuade and lead, and you will be able to really lead people that way. And of course, some questions: discuss the challenges to leadership in a changing environment, discuss the challenges to leadership in a multicultural environment, discuss challenges to leadership during mergers and acquisitions and the challenges to leadership in offshore companies, and we will come back and talk some more next time. Thank you.